Welcome back to Indiana at the voice of college football. And we got some big news to talk about during Indiana Hoosiers Live 17. Some big news since the last time we went on the air. And it's not football news, surprisingly, but we are going to talk about football for Indiana because, again, this is Indiana at the voice of college football. Definitely always going to bring that Indiana Hoosier football content even during the offseason. But we know what the big news is around Indiana athletics, and it does relate to basketball. But we're going to get to it later on in the show with Mike Woodson being gone from Indiana basketball at the end of the season. That's the catch. He's not done yet. He's not out of the picture yet. But at the end of the season, Mike Woodson will no longer be the head basketball coach of Indiana. We're going to get into all that and more later because there is a whole lot to unpack with that, a lot of storylines to talk about with that, and possibly, hopefully, Indiana finally hiring the right basketball coach after Mike Woodson's gone at the end of the season and get a new coach. That's what I've been waiting for so long, is for Indiana basketball to have a great coach. But even though they haven't had a great coach in a long time, Indiana football, they finally got their guy. We know that's Curt Cignetti. But also, it's not just Curt Cignetti. His assistants were great this past season. And outside of Tino Sunstry going to UCLA, that was a tough loss. Everybody else stayed. That's great news for Indiana. And what's even better is that Bryant Haynes gets a contract extension. I don't even know if you really want to call it an extension, because at this point, he's basically already gotten 2 extensions. So at the end of the season, he basically got a new deal that was going to give him around over $1 million a year. So $1.2 million a year, which was a massive increase from what he was originally making, which was around $600,000-$700,000 a year, which for Indiana standards in football, that is a lot of money. But we know that now in this new age of college football, prices are going up, not just for getting players, but for keeping and retaining coaches and getting coaches as well. And Bryant Haynes was a fantastic defensive coordinator this past season for Indiana. We know that he's been a part of Curt Cignetti's, basically coaching staff for a long time, even at James Madison. And there was a lot of programs wanting him. He was a candidate for the Temple head football coaching job, ECU football head coaching job. I don't know if those were really legit, but he was a candidate for those jobs. But then it came out that maybe Ohio State and some of these other programs might be wanting to get Bryant Haynes. Penn State as well. When Tom Allen left for the Clemson job, it looked like maybe Penn State might try to make a move, get Bryant Haynes. You don't want that if you're Indiana. What's so big about this for Indiana football is now a new extension, a new restructured contract for Bryant Haynes has come out, where he's going to be making $2 million a year. Why is this so huge? The reason why this is such a big deal is because this is by far the most money that an assistant coach has ever made in Indiana football history. And also only 9 assistants in the country last year made $2 million or more. We're talking all of college football. We're talking about the big boy programs. Indiana football is not among the big boy programs yet in any way, shape, or form when it comes to attendance. They don't have a big stadium. When it comes to facilities, when it comes to winning. We know Indiana football is one of the losingest programs in college football until this past season with Curt Cignetti. But what we know now is that Indiana football is spending money like these big boy programs. This is huge because Bryant Haynes, obviously, in Curt Cignetti's mind, he can not bear to watch him leave for another program. He is just too valuable to what Indiana's doing right now. Doesn't want to replace him. And Curt Cignetti's like, you know what? You gave me a big extension. I'm making $8 million a year. We're going to keep Bryant Haynes. So they did everything they could to keep him, and they're going to keep him. He's going to be making $2 million a year. I cannot even believe I'm saying this for Indiana football. This is unreal for an Indiana football assistant coach. I mean, I remember even at the Alabamas of the world a few years ago that they barely made $1 million a year, $1.5 million a year. Now Indiana football is paying an assistant coach $2 million a year. It's crazy. Indiana's upped their game in football by a lot. They realize that football is where the money is at. Football is where all these programs and all the athletics departments are making 90% of their money. It's just not happening in basketball. It's not happening in other sports. I mean, there's tons of great sports, tons of other sports that people love to play, love to watch, they enjoy, but they just don't bring in the revenue that football does. Football drives everything. And if Indiana was going to stay relevant in modern day NCAA athletics, they had to up their game in football, and that is what they are doing. I cannot just, again, describe how big of a deal that it is for Indiana to do this. I mean, if they lose Brian Haynes to another program right now, then Kurt Cignetti would have to get a new coordinator. It would just be a whole ordeal. It's just something you do not really want to have to deal with. And it would show that Indiana still is nowhere near the top. And we'll see. I mean, I'm excited to see what's going to happen for Indiana football in the future. I'm really excited about it because I think bright days are still ahead. I think Indiana could make the playoffs again. I do. I'm not saying that it's going to happen next year. I'm not even going to say that it's going to happen at all. I just think there is a really good opportunity for Indiana to continue to be really good in the future with Kurt Cignetti at head coach. And moves like this are why I'm so confident. I mean, you're seeing more and more commitment to football. The fan interest among Indiana fans is off the charts. I mean, before, at the beginning of Kurt Cignetti's tenure, couldn't even fill up the stands. Now they're selling out every game. And tons of Indiana people, tons of Indiana fans that I've talked with are saying like they're more excited about Indiana football than Indiana basketball. And that's never been said ever. And I understand Indiana basketball is going through, rough times, and they've been going through rough times for a long time. But that's like Nebraska fans suddenly saying that they're more excited about basketball season than football season. That's just not how it works. That's just not how it works. It's always Nebraska football. And for Indiana, it's always been Indiana basketball. Now, not just because Indiana basketball has been struggling, because, that is contributing to it a little bit. More so the fact Indiana football is actually fun to watch. They had a great season this past year. And the prospects of next year possibly being maybe even better somehow, even if the record isn't better because the schedule's tougher, but looking great for next season. Indiana fans are truly excited about next season. I know I am. It's far away. We're only in February right now. There's still plenty of time before, the offseason hasn't even really begun yet. It was so early in the offseason. You got the spring, spring practice, the spring game, the portal, all that kind of stuff. But, as the season gets closer and closer, excitement in Bloomington is just going to grow and grow for the next football season. And Brian Haynes being retained and getting this big of a contract to stay shows you Indiana football means business. They are for real and trying to actually create, for the first time basically ever, a good football program, a consistently good football program that can compete with some of the best programs in college football. And I'm very excited to see it. Brian Haynes, well-deserved getting the contract extension. He was fantastic this past season. And eventually, he's going to move on to greener pastures. You're not going to be able to keep him forever. It's just not the way it works. I mean, eventually, Clemson was not able to keep Brent Venables. He went to Oklahoma. You can't do it forever. But for Indiana, maybe get a few more years of Brian Haynes, the defensive coordinator. It's going to be very, very good for Indiana football and looking bright for their defense next season. Other bit of news with Indiana football, real quick, when it relates to the NFL. Cam Jones and Peyton Hendershot fall short in the Super Bowl. Both of them obviously play for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kind of just wanted to mention this really quick because a lot of you, if you've followed me on Twitter /X, you know I wanted the Chiefs to not win. So I'm just going to flat out say that. I did not want the Chiefs to win. And some people be like, well, you got to root for, your former players. Well, I mean, on the other side of the coin, you guys know I'm an Alabama fan as well. I do the show with Jackson every Thursday night on the Alabama Call-In Show. Haven't been on there the last couple weeks because, unfortunately, a little under the weather, but definitely will be back for that soon. Always a fun time with Jackson. But Jalen Hurts, and some other players for the Eagles play for Alabama. So I could use that as well. Be like, I want, former players, I want them to win the Super Bowl. It wasn't a deal whether it came to, I like the former Alabama players better than the former Indiana players. I just didn't want the Chiefs to win. I just didn't. I know we got Darrell in the chat. I don't know if he's still here, but appreciate you for stopping by, Darrell. Congrats on getting a new head coach. I definitely know that Darrell is a Chiefs fan. So if you're still here, I'm sorry to kind of slam the Chiefs a little bit, but yeah, I'm done with the Chiefs. You know, a lot of people are just kind of sick of it. They've won plenty, and then the whole celebrity stuff. You know, it's just they needed to lose, man. You know what I'm saying? They needed to lose. Dynasty isn't dead. I mean, you're seeing all these people like, oh, the dynasty's dead. How's it dead? They just made the Super Bowl. Yeah, they got blown out, but they just made the Super Bowl. They can make it next year. You know, dynasty isn't dead until Andy Reid is no longer coaching the Chiefs, and the Chiefs go through a rough patch. You know, like oh, they missed the playoffs. You know, or whatever. That's when the dynasty is like, hey, it looks like it's over. Looks like they're not going to be good anymore. Still a great team, but say it's unfortunate, you know, for Cam Jones and Peyton Hendershot not to, you know, win a Super Bowl. But I mean, I know Cam Jones got a ring last year. I don't know if Peyton Hendershot was with the Chiefs already. I don't think so. I could be wrong on that. Somebody in chat knows otherwise, 100% on that. I'd appreciate it if you let me know. But I don't know if he got a ring last year. I don't think so. I don't think he was a part of the team yet, but I could be wrong. I know Cam Jones was, but so he already has a ring. It's not that big a deal. Chiefs were terrible in the game, and like I said, most of America that I know anyway, was very happy that they lost. I mean, I know Chiefs fans. I get that. I understand that. Like, if you're a fan of the Chiefs, like if you've always been a Chiefs fan your whole life, and then suddenly, you know, Mahomes, Andy Reid, all that, that's fair. I mean, you're going to want your team to win. That's fair. But I know, you know, other people that were only Chiefs fans for the obvious reasons of the fact that they started winning and Swift, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I don't really care. But those fans, they're not true Chiefs fans. They're just people that jumped on the bandwagon. That's why they're called bandwagon fans. So, not really concerned about the way they feel. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, they're going to cry and be upset. Swifties are upset. I mean, the thing is, it was so funny last year. I mean, I was kind of making fun of it a little bit, but people were like saying that Taylor Swift's the reason the Chiefs won. I mean, is Taylor Swift now the reason they lost? No, Taylor Swift is not the reason for any of it. She doesn't impact the game. She doesn't influence the game. She's in the booth like every other person. I mean, all of us that watch the game at home, you know, I mean, like, we don't influence the game. We're not at the game, you know, even in the crowd to cheer. But even the people that are there in the crowd cheering or in a booth or whatever, I mean, it doesn't influence the game. I think President Donald Trump was at the game too. I mean, he doesn't influence the game. Nobody influences the game, you know. The only one that influences the game are the players and the referees. And the referees, I mean, a lot of people were concerned about that. I thought, you know, the game was just so out of reach that nothing mattered, right? Nothing really mattered, you know, with calls and anything like that. I mean, the Chiefs just got destroyed. The Chiefs didn't play well. I mean, they didn't protect Mahomes. They couldn't run the ball. Their defense could not stop the Eagles. And the Eagles, I mean, very fortunate to get those turnovers on Mahomes, you know. So on their side of the field, like the one they got it at the 10, they scored. The other one, Cooper DeJean, which people were excited about Cooper DeJean, you know, getting the pick six, that was huge as well. But overall, I mean, when you're looking at the Super Bowl, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, it was a blowout. It wasn't a fun game. I thought it was great. I enjoyed it. I wanted the Eagles to win, not because I'm an Eagles fan in any way, shape, or form, or even wanting Jalen Hurts and, you know, Landon Dickerson and some of the other Alabama guys to get a Super Bowl. I mean, I'm happy for them, absolutely happy for them that they were able to, but none of that. Just glad the Chiefs went down. It was definitely getting old. And even though it's unfortunate for Cam Jones and Peyton Hendershot, you know, it is what it is. I mean, maybe their team will get back there again, but man, I mean, that Super Bowl was it was crazy. A lot of people talking about the commercials like they do every year, the halftime show, all that kind of stuff. I mean, hey, I did tweet out, or, you know, I put on X that modern music's not my favorite. I mean, I think a lot of people around here know that. I'm not a big fan of modern music. It's just not good. So, I mean, the halftime show was not great, but you know what? It hasn't been great in a long time. So if people are, they like that sort of thing. That's cool. It's all good, but not my sort of thing. I listen to music where most of the people that made the music are not alive anymore. So, I mean, it is what it is. They're not, so you're not going to hear that during the halftime show, but it's overall Super Bowl, it's a phenomenon every year. Like, even people that don't even watch football much, sometimes they only watch that game. So, I mean, it brings football fans all over together. Everybody at the TV at the same time. Crazy game, crazy how it went down, and the Eagles, what a win for them. But before we wrap up Indiana Hoosiers Live 17, our last segment of the show, we have to talk about Indiana basketball. Mike Woodson to retire at the end of the season. And I think this is so funny because we're seeing a wave of coaches recently where things aren't going so hot. And what's going to inevitably happen. They're going to get fired. But in certain situations, when either there's an attachment to the person because maybe they're a former player, like in the case of Patrick Ewing or Mike Woodson here, or a legendary coach that you don't want to let go, like Jim Boeheim or Leonard Hamilton, etc., these coaches are resigning. I think it's hilarious because we know what it is. People get so caught up in the wording. You know what I'm saying? They get caught up in the wording and they take it at face value. And that's fine. I mean, you could do that. I mean, it's your right to do that. But you still should know the truth. Mike Woodson got fired. That's what this is. Mike Woodson got fired. And he should get fired because he underperformed every single year with the teams that he had. I've seen even people start to defend Archie Miller, which I never thought I would have ever heard from Indiana fans. Defend Archie Miller after his tenure at Indiana basketball. It was horrible. No NCAA tournament appearances. Granted, during the pandemic year, they would have squeaked in the tournament, but that's not any good. But why are people defending Archie Miller? Well, Archie Miller was at Indiana before NIL became legal. We know that Archie Miller was not doing what Kelvin Sampson did back in the 2000s, where, recruiting violations and what other, coaches that people think are the greatest coaches in college basketball. We know that they've done a lot of that stuff that they shouldn't do to win. Archie was not doing that. So Archie Miller, outside of a couple solid players, really never had good players. He just didn't. And yeah, it's his fault because he's the coach, whatever, but still didn't have great teams. Mike Woodson had no excuse. Absolutely none. I mean, he had Trace Jackson Davis for 2 years, arguably the best player in college basketball this last season, even though people say Zach Edey. I mean, it was neck and neck. But Jackson Davis was fantastic that final season. In Indiana, what do? They went to the round of 32 and lost to Miami. Granted, Miami had a good year, but still, lost in the round of 32. And what did Purdue do with the best player in college basketball? They went to the title game. I mean, so Indiana underperformed. And then the last 2 years, missed the tournament. I know they haven't missed the tournament completely yet this year, but they're not going to make the tournament. I mean, they should have made the tournament this year, considering that they spent over $5 million reportedly. I mean, that's not an official stat because NIL figures are very skewed. We don't know how legit they are. But according to a lot of data online, people claim that Indiana spent over $5 million on this basketball team. $5 million, which, according to those sources, is one of the highest paid teams in college basketball. So if you have one of the highest paid teams in college basketball and one of the best transfer portal hauls in college basketball, then you would expect Indiana to be good. That's why they were ranked. Because I saw a lot of people saying, oh, well, Indiana's only ranked because it's Indiana. I mean, that's hogwash, honestly. Indiana hasn't been good in 25 years. That has nothing to do with it. The brand has nothing to do with it. The reason Indiana was ranked as high as they were this year is because they had a team projected on paper that was going to be really good. I mean, you had the Pac-12 freshman of the year coming over in Miles Rice at point guard. Kanan Carlisle was on the all-freshman team at shooting guard. You had Renew, an all Big Ten player coming back. You had Ballo, One of the best players in the Pac-12 last year coming in at center. Luke Goody's a good shooter. You got Mackenzie Mbako back, a former 5-star recruit. You've got Trey Galloway back, a veteran player that loves the program. Leal's back. Anthony Leal's back. Not that that's a big deal, but he's a rotational guy that brings heart and hustle to the team. You look at the team. You look at all that, and you're like, you know what? Indiana's going to be really, really solid this year, even with Mike Woodson. And I saw a lot of people say that, and those people were correct in saying, I think Indiana will win the Big Ten this year, or I think Indiana will finish second in the Big Ten this year because their talent is really, really good. Spent a lot of money on this team. They're going to be really, really good. And despite Woodson, despite his coaching, I think Indiana will still be good. That is what people said about this team in the beginning of the year. And I said the same thing. I think Mike Woodson's going to hold them back, but I think that this team is just so talented, so good that they're gonna make the tournament easily, and they're gonna finish in the top 5 of the Big Ten at least. Well, they're not doing that right now. They're 13th in the Big Ten out of 18 teams. They're 5-8 in the conference, and they're 14-10. And you look at that record, you're like, man, they're bad. Well, you know what? At one time, they were 13-3. But the thing is they weren't playing well. You look at the beginning of the season, they were not playing well. You saw the writing on the wall. That's why when Indiana was 13-3, they weren't even barely in the tournament field. They were like in the last 4 in. And a lot of people were saying, why is that? Why is Indiana 13-3, but they're in the last 4 in? Well, it's because the eye test and the numbers, right? So the net and these other metrics base your play off how much you win by and how much you lose by. Well, when you go off all that, yeah, Indiana was 13-3, but they didn't look good. They got blown out against Louisville, blown out against Gonzaga. All the good teams they played, they got blown out in. And the 3 losses. And all their wins really weren't that impressive. And they really weren't blowing the doors off of inferior teams, kind of like last year. So Indiana gets into Big Ten play, and just the rails just fall off. I mean, they've been getting beat game after game. And the thing is, it's so funny. And something Mike Woodson said the other day, which was hilarious, is he was like, we're playing some of our worst basketball right now. I don't know what happened after that Illinois game. The funny thing is since that Illinois game where they lost by 25, they've been playing better. So I don't know. I really don't understand that. They've been playing better. The Maryland game, that Maryland game, and if you saw last show, I completely just dug into that because that performance against Maryland at the end, that coaching performance by Mike Woodson was absolutely abysmal. I'm not even going to get back into that, but it was that bad. That game, I'm like, it's over. He's not recovering from this. He's going to get fired at the end of the season, which then it comes out 2 weeks later that he's going to retire. But that Maryland game, they played well in that game, but Mike Woodson blew it at the end. Against Purdue, they played well. They barely lost to Purdue in Mackey. That's impressive. Didn't win, though. And then competitive against Michigan, a top 25 team at home. Indiana almost wins that game, too. Don't win. So Indiana has been playing better. But I don't understand why Mike Woodson is saying they're playing their worst basketball. I don't understand that. But at the end of the day, Mike Woodson did not know how to incorporate modern basketball, the modern style of basketball, into his philosophy, into his coaching philosophy. I mean, if you look at Mike Woodson's career trajectory, when he was an assistant coach under Larry Brown back in the 90s, and when he was the Hawks head coach in the 2000s, the Knicks head coach in the 2010s, he kept getting worse. Like at first, he won a lot, and then it got worse. And I know he was the last coach to take the Knicks to the playoffs before they just recently went with Thibodeau. I mean, just still, his record was not great in the NBA. And when you look at his style of play from the time that he first was head coach in 2004 at the Hawks till the last year he was head coach in the NBA at the Knicks in 2013, his style of play, it never changed. It was the same style of basketball. And the second he takes over Indiana in 2021, it is the exact same style of basketball. He's still coaching like it's the 90s. Can't do that. I mean, a lot of people trash Purdue for Zach Edey. And it's like, well, guess what? Yeah, they might have been wide open because Zach Edey drew a triple team, but Purdue hit threes. Indiana would never hit threes. They never set up guys for threes. Mike Woodson had the famous statement of, it's not my job to get Miller Kopp shots, which I don't know how you say that as a coach. It is your job to get your players shots, especially when those guys aren't Steph Curry that can create their own three. I mean, if you want to not have to create a player's shot for them, then you need to get guys that can create their own shot, that can, just chunk up anything. But Mike Woodson has never really done that. I mean, I hate to see it. I will say that. I did not want Mike Woodson to fail. I didn't. I wanted him to succeed. I wanted Archie Miller to succeed. I wanted Tom Crean to succeed, even though he kind of did until he got fired after 1 year removed from a Big Ten title. But Indiana is stuck in a rut, a proverbial rut that they have been in since Bob Knight was fired in 2000. Something that still is controversial to this day. A lot of people still question if Indiana didn't fire him, how would they be right now? I'd probably think a lot better. I don't know how much better, but I mean, Indiana's been so bad the last 25 years, I'm sure they would have been better. But it is what it is. I mean, the multiple incidences happened. Indiana got rid of them. Can't go back. So, and they've made a lot of bad hires. Kelvin Sampson was a good hire. He was a good hire back in 2006. But the allegations, and because Indiana is not one of those programs that lets their coach get away with everything, Indiana turned him in. Yeah, Kelvin Sampson was guilty. He was guilty, and they fired him. And you see what he's done at Houston. He's a great coach. Whether he cheats and does things wrong, and according to the NCAA, now NIL, everything's legal now. He's a great coach, but wrong timing, right? Wrong timing for Indiana to hire him. And then Tom Crean. Tom Crean was good, but he wasn't consistent. And I felt that his style just kind of got outdated. And he needed a lot of talent to win. If he didn't have a lot of talent, he struggled. But ever since then, Indiana's just been in a big rut. They have a ton of coaches they can hire. And I'm probably going to talk about this on next week's show and beyond. We'll get into coaching candidates. I will touch on a few. I mean, Indiana is in the running for Dusty May, according to sources. Chris Beard. Brad Stevens isn't happening. It's not going to happen. It's not. If it does, I will admit I'm wrong, but we've heard this for the last 8 years. It's not happening. You're not going to see Jay Wright. It's not happening. Scott Drew's not happening. Nate Oates isn't happening. I think Dusty May is like the most far-fetched one that you could see because of the Indiana ties. I think Indiana could lure him away. I know he said what he said about, I like it at Michigan, but he didn't commit to staying either. He just dodged the question. He's possible. I can see Chris Beard. Buzz Williams has been thrown around. Greg McDermott I would love, but that's not happening. The guy Drake McCollum, maybe. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of high major experience, but he's won a lot of games. You could kind of go maybe the Kurt Signetti route. Maybe you could take a flyer. But I don't know. It is what it is. It's going to be really interesting. All I know is I want to see Indiana basketball win like everybody else. All you Indiana basketball fans out there that have been craving and starving for wins, I don't blame you. It's been way too long since Indiana basketball has been good, and Indiana just needs to hire the right coach. At this point, I don't really care who it is. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people with baggage out there, but I mean, why do other programs get to hire coaches with baggage, and then if Indiana does, it's wrong? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, I would prefer someone with no baggage, obviously. But, I mean, I've seen people throw around Todd Golden and say Todd Golden for Indiana. Well, guess what? Todd Golden had the allegations against him a while back that have suddenly disappeared. Like everybody, there's allegations against tons of players and coaches these days. I mean, if Indiana hired Chris Beard, I guarantee you that they'd be a lot better than they are right now. I know the situation, but a lot of that was dropped, basically. I don't know. All I know is that Indiana, Scott Dolson, he made a great football hire in Kurt Signetti. I think that if he's allowed to do his job and there's no interference from Quinn Buckner, Calvert Chaney, anybody that was a former player for Indiana, none of that interference from them, I think Indiana will hire a solid coach. I don't know if it's going to be a home run hire. I hope it is. But even if it's just a solid hire that can get Indiana back to the tournament every year, just be a good team, then that would be great for Indiana. That's what Indiana basketball needs, is stability. Before you can ever dream about the sixth banner and just getting back to that, you got to get back to being a solid program. Stop missing the tournament. Stop bringing in 5-star players and doing nothing with them. Stuff like that. So that's what I'm hoping. And yes, Mike Woodson was fired. He was fired. He needed to be let go, and that's why he's announcing that he's retiring, his resignation or whatever. But it's been a rough season for Indiana. A lot of talent just going down the drain. But hopefully for Indiana, they will be better next season with a new coach.
Ohio State, Michigan, the greatest rivalry in sports deserves the greatest debate in sports. Monday, February 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the main channel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan all everything debate with me, taking your calls all night if it takes all night. I'm pulling no punches, so beware. Bring your best intel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan all everything debate. It will be epic. February 17th, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there.
You know that's going to be crazy. Mark your calendars, February 17th, 6 o'clock, the debate between Ohio State and Michigan. It will rage on to the end of time. The fan bases for the both teams, crazy. And we got a lot of Ohio State and Michigan fans in the Voice of College Football community. So definitely go check out the Ohio State-Michigan debate with Mark Rogers, February 17th at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. It's going to be wild. But thanks, everybody, for being here tonight for Indiana Hoosiers Live 17. Definitely going to read your comments really quick. Definitely appreciate you being here. Jackson, as always, you're the best, man. Saying Jeffrey on the Alabama College Show every Thursday nights. That's always a blast. Can't wait to get back with that. And also plugging Mark's stuff as well. The State of the Voice of College Football as well on February 24th. You're not going to want to miss that as well. We talk about what's going on around the community. Again, thanks for Darrell MVP for stopping by. Jackson says Indiana basketball needs a college basketball equivalent of Matt Rule. That would be solid. Aaron Taylor says they got paved. I agree. Yes, they did. They got paved. The Chiefs, they definitely did. Thanks for that, Jackson. Definitely feeling a little bit better still. Not all the way 100% yet, but definitely getting there. Appreciate that. I agree. That was overblown. The way they talk about Kelvin Sampson, that was way overblown, especially with what other coaches have gotten away with. It's ridiculous. Buzz Williams, I think he's an underrated candidate. I really do. I think Indiana should consider him. I think that he would do very well at Indiana. Love his energy. And then Jack says, we need the SpongeBob narrator for the Ohio State Michigan all everything debate. Yeah, you can't beat the SpongeBob narrator. I mean, trust me, he'll get tired real quick if you know what I mean, between the debate going back and forth. But it's going to be wild. But again, thanks everybody for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the Indiana at the Voice of College Football channel down below. Trying to build up the subs. We're getting close to 80 subscribers. Going to have more basketball content down the pike as, Indiana basketball searches for a new coach and maybe see if they can somehow salvage their season. Not likely at all since Mike Woodson sticking around for the end of the season, but you never know. And more Indiana football offseason content as well. Going to keep talking about Hoosier football as we get geared up for next season. It's going to be a lot of fun as we do that, but appreciate everybody for being here, and go Hoosiers.